Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very senior individual from the world of academia, from Charlotte, now North Carolina, Dr. Stephen G. Rogelberg. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. I appreciate it. And I
Thank
appreciate what you do with this podcast very much.
Thank you. Stephen is the Chancellors Professor at the UNC Charlotte. Adam Grant has called Stephen the world's leading expert on how to fix meetings. Dr. Rogelberg's previous book, The Surprising Science of Meetings, How You Can Lead Your Team to Peak Performance, has been on over 25 best of lists, including being recognized by the Washington Post as the #1 leadership book to watch for. His second book, Glad We Met, The Art and Science of One-on-One Meetings, came out in January and is already receiving tremendous praise, including a SHRM Top 12 Workplace Books recognition. His keynotes on meetings span the globe and occur at the world's leading organizations, including but not limited to Google, Facebook, Amazon, Pfizer, Cisco, Bank of America, PayPal, Dell, the United Nations, 3M, Rand, the Security Exchange Commission, Corning, Siemens, London Stock Exchange, TIAA, and Warner Brothers. My goodness, what an amazing track record you have, Stephen.
Thank you.
So my first question to you is that you have been called the world's leading expert on how to fix meetings. What is the one common misconception about meetings that you'd like to debunk before we get into your book?
That's a fun question. I will say that what people don't realize is that meetings are actually an evolution for humankind.
Okay.
That the Industrial Revolution was all about command and control systems. Meetings really were an evolution from that to recognize that employee voice and inclusion and input could elevate individual teams and organizations in new ways. So I guess while we complain about meetings, and for lots of good reasons, a world without meetings is much more problematic than our current state.
Wow. Fantastic. Thank you. So let's talk about your book, Glad We Met, The Art and Science of One-on-One Meetings. And before I ask you the first question, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Dr. Stephen Rogelberg's book. And I'm going to check the book myself. So my first question is, what was your hypothesis when you wrote Glad We Met?
Well, I knew that this concept of one-on-one meetings at work was highly unexplored. And so I really didn't enter into this with hypotheses per se. I entered into it with the desire to explore and learn about whether this is truly a critical meeting type for organizational and leader success. And because it just hadn't been well established. And we absolutely found that. This is the one meeting that should never be an email. This is the meeting, the one-on-one meeting is where you can truly see your people. And so stepping back, let me just quickly tell your listeners what I mean by a one-on-one meeting.
Okay.
Obviously, our days are filled with one-on-one encounters. And obviously, there are plenty of times that we have a meeting with our manager where they tell us something or ask us a question. That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
When I talk about a one-on-one meeting, I'm talking about a regular, reoccurring meeting between a manager and their direct that the manager is orchestrating and facilitating, but it's not for them. It's actually for their direct.
Okay.
It's the opportunity for the direct to express their thoughts, their concerns, ask for help, ask for feedback. They should control the agenda. In many regards, this is a meeting where the manager's goal is to help their directs feel truly seen. Truly seen. And if we all reflect on when we've had a manager or someone empowered take a genuine interest in us, it's transformative, right? We feel more connected to the person, to the organization, to the entity, not to mention that we're getting the critical support that we need to thrive. So one-on-one meetings, so the goal of the research was to establish whether this is truly a critical meeting type, whether it's worth the investment of time. And the bottom line is the outcomes were unreal. They were amazing. This bringing humanity into the workplace in the form of these one-on-one meetings, there are transformative outcomes that can arise.
Amazing. But my question then is, how do one-on-one meetings differ in importance from group meetings in today's environment, especially when town halls seem to be the way most leaders want to talk to their people?
Right. So there's a place for both. Group meetings, town hall meetings, they have different goals.
Correct.
Right. So when we think about a team meeting, that's really should be around engagement around a particular topic or problem where the collective works together to figure it out. That's different. The one-on-one it's really the manager is listening more than talking.
Right.
They're not controlling the agenda. Right. They're telling their employee to come to the meeting with a set of topics or questions that they want to explore, learn about, connect around. And so the manager's giving up their control, giving up their power, and giving to their people for this one predictable time. Right. Because managers, when you have the power, you have the ability to meet and connect with your people anytime you want on your terms. This is just a different type of a commitment. This is you as a manager saying, listen, you're important to me. Your success is important to me. Your thriving is important to me. I'm committed to making sure we find time every week or every other week, whether it's 20 minutes to 40 minutes, where I'm focused on whatever you want to have a conversation around.
Right.
And that's an important signal. And, the other thing, kind of playing with this notion of signals, our behaviors are constantly signaling to others who we are. But when we don't behave in particular ways, the lack of behavior is also a signal of who we are. So while we could argue that, one-on-ones are optional, and maybe if you have time to do them, but that's not true.
Right.
Think about the signal. If you're not willing to dedicate a predictable time to each of your people, that's a signal that you don't really care and that you're prioritizing everything else over your folks.
Well said. But then, Stephen, there is another reality that we are now being faced with post-COVID, and that is remote working or work from home or hybrid working. How does the dynamic of remote or virtual one-on-one meetings differ from in-person meetings, and what strategies can be applied to ensure they're just as effective?
That's a great question. Thank you. Well, good news. Virtual meetings are enjoying the highest levels of satisfaction and effectiveness that we've had. People are getting better at them. Makes sense, right? We've been doing them a lot. I love face-to-face meetings. I think they can be really meaningful.
Yeah.
But it's false to assume that just because something is virtual, it can't be as good or better. Virtual meetings actually have more promise in some ways than face-to-face meetings.
Right.
The setup in virtual meetings inherently more democratic, right? You don't have head of table effects.
Correct.
You have chat, which allows for more voices to enter into the conversation, right? You have these plugins that allow for voting to truly test consensus. All the AI tool plugins are so helpful. So virtual meetings not only have a place, but it's a really important and strategic place. I always like when managers do find some opportunity to have some, in-person contact with their folks. But I can't stress enough that the modality of contact matters less than the quality of the contact.
Okay.
So if you and I never meet in person,
Hmm.
but our virtual interactions are meaningful, authentic,
Hmm.
and engaging,
Hmm.
they're going to be a heck of a lot more powerful than
Right.
if you and I were meeting in person and it was a meaningless conversation.
What a great response. Thank you. You also, I want to talk to you that you talk about a strategy from your book that can transform a one-on-one meeting into a powerful engagement tool. Tell me a little bit more about this and how can we do this?
Sure. When we think about these one-on-one meetings,
Hmm.
and they're regular and they're predictable, and these meetings are really employee focused,
Hmm.
and employees feel safe to engage, um, it just sets them up for success and thriving. Their needs are getting met. They're learning that their manager cares and is interested in their success.
Mm-hmm.
They are seeing a bigger picture, right? Because they're learning about maybe how this work fits into the broader landscape of the organization. And all these things helps foster attachment. We've all heard the adage that people don't leave bad bosses.
Right.
I'm sorry, bad jobs.
Bad
They
job,
leave bad
bad
bosses.
bosses.
And one-on-ones are the opportunity to prove that you're not a
Mm.
bad boss.
Mm.
And so, and again, we can reflect ourselves. We can
Mm.
reflect on that person who took a great interest in us, and we were really willing to fight for them,
Mm.
right? We're willing to really connect and help enact their vision.
Mm.
That's what meaningful relationships and connection do.
Mm. Wow. And the other aspect of one-on-one meetings is, and I've experienced this many times when I was speaking to someone senior or when someone was speaking to me, and someone would say, but you're not there in the meeting. So my question is, how can leaders ensure they're fully present and engaged in a one-on-one meeting?
Yeah. Leaders just have to embrace this notion that the one-on-one meeting
Hmm.
is not only for their directs,
Hmm.
but it actually benefits them too.
Okay.
That ultimately leaders are evaluated on the basis of the success of those people that report into them.
Hmm.
So as they help those around them succeed, it only is good for them,
Hmm.
right? It makes them look good. So this is an investment in their own success too. But what a beautiful thing, right? When we
Right.
can invest in our own success by lifting others, right?
Hmm.
That's pretty fabulous. Furthermore, we had some data to suggest that when leaders were doing these on a regular basis,
Hmm.
they reported often feeling like they weren't interrupted as much throughout the weeks. That basically employees would save
Hmm.
their issues, topics for the one on one.
Hmm.
So, therefore, with less interruptions, managers have a greater ability to get their work done. And finally, I'll say this: one of the best predictors
Hmm.
of someone's satisfaction with life
Hmm.
is helping others,
Hmm.
right? Your motivation for doing this podcast.
Hmm.
Helping others is the greatest way of having a meaningful and satisfying life.
Hmm. Well
So
said.
doing one-on-ones, it just hits every single target.
Hmm.
It's good for your directs,
Hmm.
but it's also really good for you
Hmm.
as a manager.
Fantastic. Thank you. And do you have any recommendations for frequency and duration of one-on-one meetings for them to be effective?
Sure. So this is what the book is all about.
Yeah.
The book really gets into all the elements of how to carry these things out effectively.
Hmm.
And by the way, I know you mentioned earlier encouraging your audience to check out the book.
Mm,
I do want to say that it's just so important for me to get this science out there
mm,
because I know it can have such a positive impact
yeah.
that all my royalties from the book are all being donated to cancer research.
Wow.
So there's no personal
Mm,
profit here.
mhm,
It's all about trying to get the science out and obviously support
mm, mm.
eradication of cancer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, so in terms of cadences, the
Frequency and duration we were talking about.
yep. So it appears that every week or every other week are the most effective cadences,
Hmm.
rhythms for these one-on-ones.
Mm,
It's not too frequent where
mm,
the manager micromanagers, but it's also not too infrequent
mhm,
such that a meaningful story doesn't emerge.
mm,
When you meet with the person every week or every other week, you start to truly build the relationship and the connection between each of these meetings.
mm,
You know, if you have a friend and you only talk every month or every 3 months,
mm,
right? Typically, those conversations will be more catch up,
mm.
right? Then you're not going to get into
Correct.
substance.
Correct.
So the weekly, every other week, the amount of time that actually is not as critical because it's all about quality of time. So whether these meetings are 20 minutes to 50 minutes to an hour, they're all good. They're
Mm,
all good if done well.
mm,
And then I'll also add that as part of some data collection, we asked people what's their preferred frequency.
mhm,
And interestingly, it lined up perfectly with what we found in terms of the most impactful frequency.
mm,
Employees preferred
mm.
weekly or every other week. And that just speaks to the fact that it's a humans recognize that having meaningful time with their manager can really make a difference.
Said. Well said. There is another aspect of meetings, which is psychological safety in a meeting. How does the concept of psychological safety play into the effectiveness of one-on-one meetings?
Psychological safety is, very much this idea that you're willing to bring your whole self
Hmm,
into a conversation
hmm,
and that you feel comfortable doing that
hmm,
and that you're willing to engage in an honest and candid, transparent way.
hmm,
Psychological safety means so much
mhm,
to the success of these one-on-ones. If we don't have safety, then the conversations will be shallow
hmm,
and not have the same meaning. So, what can a manager do to promote that safety in the one-on-one? So, first of all, they can make sure that the employee is driving the agenda,
hmm,
right? Because that's another key signal that, hey, this meeting is for you. I want to make sure this meeting is valuable to you,
hmm,
right? So that's setting the stage. Then, when they're in that meeting, they are truly listening, really listening,
hmm.
not superficially listening, but
Right.
truly listening.
Hmm,
They are being kind,
hmm,
they are being supportive, they are offering help where needed.
right.
And when they make commitments, they're doing them.
Hmm,
They're actually doing them. They're
hmm,
also willing to be appropriately vulnerable.
hmm,
So if you want others to feel comfortable sharing, you have to be willing
hmm.
to appropriately share at
Right.
times.
Right.
I'm not at all talking that the manager should just be disclosing every problem they have.
Hmm,
But in any relationship, to the extent that we can be somewhat, authentic, the relationship can blossom.
hmm. Well said.
So those are the elements that
Hmm,
kind of comprise safety. So it's very doable, but it does take intentionality.
hmm. Well said. There's also another aspect in meetings, Stephen, which is different personalities, introverts, extroverts, people
Yeah.
are shy, people have different working styles. How can one-on-one meetings be tailored to fit different personality types or working styles?
Yeah. this book was really different than my last book, The Surprising Science of Meetings. So in this book, as you mentioned, so the title is Glad We Met, colon, the art and science of one-on-one meetings. So there is an art to this. And so I constructed the book such that it lays out choices for managers. And then they need to fit those choices to who they are and to who their direct is. There absolutely is not a one-size-fits-all formula to this. And they should constantly be in the habit of following up with their directs and asking them, are you getting value from this? What else can we do to make sure that this is valuable to you? We also don't want these things to get stale. So we should be mixing up how they look. So if the leader tends to ask particular questions each time, maybe around, what are your big challenges going on? How can I help you? Mix it up over time. Make sure you insert a question about their long-term desires. Insert a question around asking them their general preferences for maybe how they like to get feedback, or how they like to receive positive feedback. And so just mix it up to keep these conversations dynamic and exciting and enjoyable. That helps as well. So there's definitely this art, but it's very doable. And, we do it all the time. When we think about our various relationships in our lives, we flex depending on that relationship and that person. So we want to do the same when it comes to one-on-one meetings.
Well said. So time for two more questions.
Okay.
In your book, you mentioned the transformative potential of one-on-one interactions. Would you be able to share a case study, no names, of course, or an example where one-on-one meetings significantly impacted organizational success?
Sure. So one study I refer to in the book, what they found was that employees' sales goal performance was much higher in departments that the manager was doing one-on-ones with their people than those departments that they weren't. So that in this case, employees were just able to figure out what they needed to be better at closing sales. And so that to me is incredibly compelling. We also know that when people were surveyed around how effective they think one-on-ones are to their success, the vast majority of both managers and directs said that well-conducted one-on-ones absolutely elevate the success of all, including the team. So we have their self-report assessments, and then we have some of those data around goal achievement.
Wow. And my last question to you.
Sure.
What is the one key takeaway you hope our viewers and listeners and your readers will take away from Glad We Met?
Sure. Thank you. I'll circle back to a statement I made earlier because I think it's a great way of closing things up. And that is that this is the one meeting that should not be an email. When we think about the pandemic, what we missed was not just going to work and having meetings or sitting in our office. What we missed was genuine connection.
Correct.
Genuine connection. And I think a key takeaway from this book is that investing in genuine connection is good for everyone. It raises all boats. And so while we have a tendency to rebel against meetings, and again, for good reasons, I mean, there's lots of ways of making meetings better. This is the other type of a meeting that is just so powerful, especially right now.
Wow.
Especially right now.
Amazing. And on that note, Stephen, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me. I've sat in meetings all my life, but I genuinely think that talking to you today has opened my eyes on the art and science of one-on-one meetings. I had never, or I could never have visualized the amount of uh, detailing and the amount of undercurrents and the amount of learnings that go on when two people interact with one another. And you brought it out so beautifully in our conversation today. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.